It was 1343 BC, and a 19-year-old boy who had been king of Egypt for half his life had died. We don't know, and we may never know, whether he was the victim of illness, accident, or assassination. But we do know this, that when the remains of King Tutankhamun and the treasures that surrounded them were found 3,000 years later, the final phrase of his mummification ritual came true. You live again forever. Here you are young once more, forever. When one enters the exhibit area for the first time, one gets a touch of the feeling experienced on that extraordinary day, the 25th of November, 1922, when British Lord Carnarvon and archaeologist Howard Carter poked through a wall of King Tut's tomb in the Valley of the Kings and uncovered secrets that lay buried for 300 centuries. That moment, when modern man was first privileged to see, almost intact, a regal burial ensemble dating back to the 14th century BC, was of course incomparable. But here and now, 55 years later, other generations also stand in awe of what they see at the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto. The history, the artistry, the majesty of the 18th dynasty. The gold alone, weighing as it did more than 3,000 pounds, would be worth $14.5 million on today's market. But needless to say, no dollar value can be placed on the treasures of King Tutankhamun. Why then were these priceless antiquities removed from the safety and security of their home in the Cairo Museum 2 years ago to travel the world?
Many people really didn't know anything about Egypt. This triggered something in them to know something about Egypt. And once they got interested in ancient Egypt, by force of logic, they would get interested in modern Egypt, and then would ask themselves, what's that country? What's its role in this turbulent age we are living in? And naturally, with the appeal to peace, which our president launched and ended into a peace treaty with Israel, well, I could see, some traces of Tutankhamun in it.
For half a century now, men have been putting into pictures and words their views of the treasures of the boy king. So there is much to see and read about these marvelous works of art. Still, no words, no photographs can really quite convey the feeling of wonderment one gets as he stands beside these temperature and humidity-controlled plastic cases with their earthquake-resistant devices. The wood, the bronze and copper, the silver and gold, the quartz and colored glass, ebony, ivory, alabaster, obsidian, lapis lazuli, and cornelian, and most of all, the artistry with which they were used, are truly overpowering. One might ask, what would the king himself say about all this?
Suppose he's coming himself to see his own treasures.
What would he say?
I think he will wonder as anybody else. Because if he lives our life, certainly he will have the same mentality, he will have the same kind of culture, and will wonder at that remote civilization and its product.
From Toronto at the end of December, King Tut moves to Germany, where he and his extraordinary belongings are to reside for a couple of years. Then home in late '81 to get ready for another trip to Australia. Tutankhamun, a restless figure who was the victim of a systematic attempt to erase him from history, but whose reappearance in our time has assured him survival for all time. Warren Doremus, TV 10 News, Toronto.